Welcome to Hack the Entrepreneur, the show which reveals the fears, habits, and inner battles behind big-name entrepreneurs and those on their way to joining them. Now here is your host, John Naster.
Hey, this is Hack the Entrepreneur. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I am your host, John Naster, but you can call me Johnny. My guest today is a tech investor, advisor, and entrepreneur. He is currently the co-founder and CEO of Cheddar, a billing platform built for developers. Since founding Cheddar in 2009, they've grown organically, and as of the summer of 2017, they received their first round of funding for $1.2 million. In this conversation, we discuss the power of partnerships, problem solving as a skill set, and using persistence to deal with the ups and downs of running a business. Now, let's hack Mike Trotzke. All right, I've got a scenario for you. What would happen to your business if the very next business book you read, or the course you took, or the marketing strategy that you learned on a podcast or on a blog, what if that was executed on? And not just executed on when you have time to get to it, but taken action on day after day. Now, to be clear, I don't want you personally doing this work. I'm urging you, as I have done in the past, I'm urging you to start thinking like the CEO of your business, no matter what the size of your company is at the moment. And as the CEO, I want you to think globally. Let your mind carry you across the ocean to the Philippines. This is where you can hire a virtual assistant who is talented, honest, reliable, and capable of doing thought work for $300 to $800 for full-time work. Anything your business needs to grow can be outsourced. Programmers, graphic designers, social media experts, writers, SEO experts, you name it. You need help with your business, and there are people looking for work today. Start browsing over 250,000 resumes right now. If for nothing else, then just to see what's possible for your business. Go to onlinejobs.ph/hack. It's the world's largest and safest marketplace for finding rockstar workers. Once again, that's onlinejobs.ph/hack. We are back with another episode of Hack the Entrepreneur. And today we have a very, very special guest. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely my pleasure, Mike. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So I'm glad you could join me today.
I'm excited.
Cool. Let's jump into it, shall we?
Sounds good.
Mike, as an entrepreneur, can you tell me what is the one thing that you do that you feel has been the biggest contributor to your successes so far?
Oh man, I don't actually think I'm that good at anything. If I had to answer, I would probably say it's just persistence. So I always think that the only way a company can fail is for the founder to quit. And so we've had a lot of companies that have been a little bit too early to market, or had the wrong solution to the problem or whatever. But we sort of have a little bit of that ethic of not giving up. I think for me, I've always tried really hard to fall in love with solving problems as opposed to my solution to the problem. So when the solution doesn't quite work out, I still have the problem to chase. And so I'm still, focused on keep hammering at that until we can get something that works. So I would say persistence is a big thing. We've always focused pretty heavily on monetization and not being afraid of money. So thinking of it as a metric for what value we're providing and using it to drive us. So that's been sort of the guide through that determination of whether or not we've hit on the solution. So as long as I keep focused on solving whatever problem we set out to solve, I can keep being motivated to not give up. Not let a company die.
So what's sort of like that real challenge with solving problems? Like you said, how you sort of differentiated between like solving the right problem or your problem and a valuable problem?
Well, so the thing is that a lot of times, and I see this with a lot of companies that we've invested in too, founders get really excited sort of about their idea. And so they're really motivated by whatever solution that they've come up with. So whether it's this app or this way of doing it or whatever, that solution or idea, that nugget that they came up with is what drives them. And so as soon as that sort of doesn't quite pan out, that solution, which really the first solution you typically bring to solve any problem, probably isn't exactly right. And so when that starts to not pan out, they have a tendency to be like, feel very dejected and sort of give up on that. Versus like when you look at what you're trying to do and you say, okay, this is the problem I'm attempting to solve. And I have this proposed solution, but it's really just a hypothesis. And I'm going to keep hammering on this, solving this problem, whether it be for us, I want to help at Cheddar, for example, we're trying to solve the problem of it's frustrating to me that people keep building basically the same billing systems over and over, that they wait to solve monetization in their product. And so for us, I'm more concerned with that than what we're offering as a solution. We'll continue to iterate on the solution until it solves the problem we care about. And that has given me the sort of motivation to stay persistent with working towards that problem. And also, when I look at a problem and I can understand that a customer is willing to pay for a solution to that problem, so I can use monetization as a guide to help me see that the solution I'm providing is actually solving the problem I'm trying to solve, if that makes sense. So leveraging those tools really helps me stay motivated.
So if people are paying you, it's a guide that you are solving the problem.
Yeah, and not necessarily just in sort of short term, right? So one of the things that's very popular, I live in the Midwest, and so the sort of mentality of the Midwest is sell the large clients through sort of relationship sales. And I'm not necessarily talking about that. So I don't try to think, it's not about just revenue chasing where you're going after the biggest dollar customer to build a custom solution for them. I really think you kind of only stomach an individual customer, but you love your customers in more of a collective sense. So looking at your whole set of customers and saying, when I do this, this increases our revenue. When I do that, it decreases our revenue, more broadly than necessarily chasing after an individual customer's revenue, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And then I like this idea of focusing on the problem. And so you're right, we come up with this app or this service or this product or this software to fix a problem. And when that isn't sort of adopted by the market or picked up or paid for, we give up on the problem rather than you're saying we should just give up on what we thought was the solution and actually find the real solution to this problem.
Yeah, I feel like that sort of sense of failure that people have when their initial idea didn't solve the problem is when people stop working on solving problems. And that shouldn't be, you shouldn't become an entrepreneur because you have a solution. You should become an entrepreneur because something bugs you and you're frustrated by it and you want to fix it and you're going to keep working until you fix it. People use the word pivot. I don't even necessarily think it's about pivoting to a whole nother idea. Some people do that. But to me, it's more about saying, okay, you probably identified a problem. Maybe not always. Maybe it turns out that it's not really a problem. But I see a lot more deals where there's actually, I look at it, I'm like, man, yeah, this is a problem that people have. And then I look at the solution and probably the distribution method or something about it isn't actually able to solve that problem. But it doesn't mean that that problem doesn't exist and that someone won't solve that problem. And if you have a shot at trying to solve it and you failed, you're a step ahead of anybody else who's going to solve that problem. So you should take advantage of that and keep pushing forward on it and not just sort of give up. And that's the thing, is that it's where your emotions are, right? So it's, what are you tying your life to? Are you tying your life to this idea that you had one day in the shower, or are you tying your life to trying to solve a long-term problem? And you can have more than one of those. So like for me, I'm very interested in helping grow the tech scene in Bloomington, Indiana, in the little town that I live in. And so that's one of my major long-term, lifelong problems that I'm working to solve. And I certainly have not found the solution to that. But because I'm motivated by the problem, I'm going to do that till the day I die, probably.
Yeah. And it's interesting because what you're saying is absolutely true. And yet most people don't think that. I think like successful companies, they think that successful companies haven't done that, right? Like Slack comes out of nowhere, it seems, and like completely takes over instant communication and becomes $1 billion company. But we kind of forget that a couple years prior to that, that team actually built a video game that failed miserably called Glitch.
Right.
And then during that failure, they noticed this sort of gap in a market and an actual problem. And they just moved and went and created that. And it was like, wow, but there you go. But we think that they started as something completely different. And
Right.
I mean, YouTube,
well, we also don't realize that
YouTube was a dating app. It's like, or like a dating video app. And it's like, they realized this isn't going to work. We have to move into something else. And they completely changed the product. And now it's YouTube. Like, these things happen all the time. And I don't know why we don't, when it comes to ourselves doing it on like, because it's a smaller scale, we just think, no, that's a failure and I'm no good. So I'm going to try something completely different now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily knock, dig and flick. I mean, there's been tons of these large companies that have made shifts. I will say that that's probably focused on a little bit more. It's a more interesting story, right? It's something that I'm going to read about that a journalist wants to write about. So there's maybe a little bit of emphasis bias on that, like hard shift to something completely different. But that does happen. It does happen a lot. And that's often, I think, part of the sort of quality of the entrepreneur, especially when they've raised capital, right? And they've owed back a success to their investors. And they say, you know what, this didn't work, but we're a stand-up set of founders that are going to try and turn this around, maybe in a totally different direction. But I also think I'm not as easy, I think, as some people to sort of give up on ideas, not so much in the solution, but in the problem space of the idea. Like, we didn't do that right. Let's try it again. It might be an app now instead of a web app, or it might be, sold through relationship sales instead of through online sales, or it might be, there might be shifts like that are pretty major to a company. But I tend to get really focused on solving that problem. And so I'm less likely, I think, than some to like completely pivot. But that being said, it's not like I don't only have one problem that I care about. I care about monetizing the Midwest and helping Midwestern companies get to monetization faster than everybody else. And that's a passion for me, but so is growing Bloomington and getting our tech space working and our conference going and all those sort of things that we're doing here. So you can have more than one problem that you really care about. And so sometimes it makes sense to hop over to that next one.
Okay, so let's hop over. Let's hop over to projects as a loose term. As somebody with the idea behind them that they want to solve many of these problems, some lifelong problems that you just know you're going to work on, and some probably shorter term, maybe quicker to monetize problems. But how somebody like you, correct me if I'm wrong, so you are running Cheddar at this point?
Yes.
And then you have other projects on the go at the same time.
So, yeah, there's a lot of juggling projects because I'm also the co-founder of a company called Sproutbox. And Sproutbox is like a hybrid venture capital firm / software development firm. So the core idea is you apply to Sproutbox. We select, a company a quarter to invest. So we typically write a, say, $250,000 check to the company, and they turn around and would write a $200K check back to us to hire our team of 10 to help build the project alongside the founders. So we were kind of sort of a web app or mobile app for equity type, sort of a venture studio model, but much more regimented in that we only did work for equity, and we build a new company every 3 months for about 6 years. So we built 28 different companies that do, all kinds of different things. And so I did that for many, many years and managed sort of the dev shop side of that. And we built companies like Visible and Sigster and sold some of those companies. And so I still have kind of my fingers in a bunch of those companies. In fact, when I came on as CEO of Cheddar, I had to step back from a number of those companies and a number of boards, and some of which I co-founded. And so, it's definitely been a challenge to focus and to decide where to focus your energy on projects when there's literally tons of companies that I helped found and I care a lot about, and then you mix that together with like this sort of, I mentioned the Bloomington mission. But I will say for me, that mission of helping, grow technology here in the Midwest and helping our little town be, sort of all that it can be in that space has been overarching for me. So when you think about all the things that I'm doing, I have sort of this overall mission that all the other projects sort of fit into. So we built Sproutbox partially because we were frustrated with angel investing and wanting to be more involved in actually building product. We're software guys, we're user experience guys, want to create things. So that's part of it. But another part of it is we needed something like that in Bloomington, Indiana, right? And so then I look at it and I say, well, the next step for us is to really attract some outside capital to one of our companies and, see companies, real institutional seed investments from all over the Midwest coming into Bloomington. And so the best way to do that was for me to take a company in our portfolio and really double into it. I loved it already, and I love pricing and monetization. So I became CEO there, and then we raised a round of financing from outside sources into Bloomington. Sort of the next step for Bloomington, but also the next step for us as a company. So that has helped drive my mission, right? So when I sold my first, we had our first big exit back in 2007 and sold Resite to Dominion Enterprises. I had a decision to make at that point, and I was either going to move to another community. I was going to move to, I looked at Boulder, obviously. I was going to move someplace that already had a tech scene, or I was going to stay in Bloomington and create one. And when I made the decision to work on that, that sort of defined the next 30 years of my life and helps me prioritize projects accordingly, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. So it's like there's an overarching goal, and then you kind of pick and choose between like other projects that depending on how you're trying to push sort of that overarching goal.
Exactly. And I try to line those up, line sort of everything up. But some of it's not that intentional, right? A lot of times I gravitate to the things I love doing, and so I just keep doing them. That makes for a good day, right? Every day. So as long as I'm doing that and I'm having a ton of fun and I don't feel like I'm working, then it's great, right? And so I keep doing it, and it sort of works out. One of the things that's difficult is mixing that together with actually, making enough money to be successful. And it's interesting when you make that little twist to where you feel like part of knowing if you're doing a good job, if you sort of accept sort of this somewhat capitalist idea, but you accept this idea that, hey, when I'm making money at this, I'm providing value to others, and you let that drive you. But you still, that's not your end goal. Your end goal is something broader than that. Those two things coming together, tend to work out pretty well.
How do you ensure that you don't spread yourself too thin?
I do spread myself too thin. I mean,
all right.
That's the biggest challenge, is that I always feel bad because, things drop off. And my wife and I talk about this a lot because she's very, task list oriented. She gets everything done. She never commits to things she doesn't come through on. And I'm sort of on the other end of the spectrum where, my inbox is full of things that I'd love to do and help with. And, I tend to overcommit, and then hopefully somebody comes up and cleans up my under delivering, which does happen a lot. I've had, a lot of good people around me to sort of balance that and sort of balance how I can be a bit over optimistic about how many things I can be involved in things. But I kind of feel like there's, everyone who has a messy room says, no, there's a system to this, and there's probably not. But I sort of feel like there's a little bit of system to the chaos for me, where the things that are most critical tend to make it to the top, even though it seems like a big chaotic mess underneath. But it is difficult to manage sometimes. But I've enjoyed really focusing on Cheddar. So that's being able to sort of hone in on something I really, really care about has been great.
Before we go any further, I just want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor. What drives the value of your business? It's the ability to solve problems, to find the proper solution, the proper problem that your customer has, and then find a way to solve it. The absolute best way that I have found to do this is to ask. Ask your ideal customer. Ask your existing customers. Ask past customers. It's all about collecting feedback, conducting surveys, and it's critical to your business's success. Remember, what you ask matters. How you ask is everything. Join today and start making data collection a little more human. There's a special offer for you as a Hack the Entrepreneur listener. You can upgrade to their Pro account and you'll get 30% off for the first 6 months. Go to typeform.com/hack. They have unbelievable support staff and a help center to get you going fast. You can sign up absolutely for free today. Go to typeform.com/hack. Now, let's get back to the show. So throughout this conversation, you've mentioned partners, co-founders, and it seems to be something that really runs through most things that you've started over the years, which is a lot. And so I would like to sort of dig into sort of how you're choosing partners, if that's something we can do. We can use Cheddar if you want, like as a specific example to think about. I believe that's a friend of yours and you've worked with him over many years now.
Yeah.
Solving problems. But what is that process you go through today when there's a project and you're deciding on a co-founder?
Well, us as partners, we've been partners for 20 some years as a group. So that's a really weird situation. I mean, I've been married to my business partners longer than my wife. And so, that's, I think, very unusual, but it's been awesome. You think about like quality of life, having folks in business with me that I, can trust completely. I know they're going to be there consistently. I mean, those are not things I have to worry about. And taking that off your plate as a co-founder is huge. So I actually met my business partner that started Recite with me, as well as my first company, Worldview, and then Sproutbox, a guy named Brad Whistler. I met him in college. I ran his campaign for student body president while we were in school. And then we started a company together. That company was a media consulting company that kind of spun out of the work we were doing in sort of student government politics. We took it into, regular politics. We got super, super lucky and landed the Speaker of the House and did early on loan donations in the late 90s. We were one of the first folks to really push that. And we hired Mark, actually, who is my business partner on Cheddar, at that company. So I've worked with him ever since then. Then together, we co-founded, the three of us and another partner co-founded Recite, which is a company I mentioned before that we sold. And then the three of us, Mark, Brad, and I, all founded Sproutbox together. So you see a pattern of us consistently working together. We found the right people to sort of balance each other out. So, Mark is the best engineer I've ever worked with. He's highly technical. Most people would characterize him as grumpy and not interested in talking to you very much. He's a pessimist, right? And then, I might sound like an optimist, but until you meet my business partner, Brad Whistler, he's the most optimistic, chaotic, sort of all over the place idea person. The three of us have always found a balance with each other, even though we are just dramatically different. I often found myself sort of in the middle, frustrated with Brad's ADD and with Mark's interest in not communicating, right? So like these two things. But yeah, I think we found a partnership that has lasted an amazing amount of time, given that we're all strong personalities. We all view problems very, very differently. But for us, we look at that as a strength. And some people, I remember at Recite, there was frustration sometimes with our employees, particularly when we got over like 25 or 30 employees, that we were slow. We would be in a boardroom and we would argue for sure about all kinds of things. And so, that's sort of the advantage of having like a single non-partnership kind of founder that's like, this is the way we're going to do it, right? But we always believe that it might just take us, an extra hour, but that we were more likely to come to the right decision between all of our different ways of thinking. So for us, I think it's been a big part of our success. And like you'd fight with your wife, it gets intense, right? But at the same time, we really appreciate each other and we really rely on each other. So I think that's a beautiful thing. It makes my life, better. And so I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. And I agree. Having those other perspectives and the ability to fight it out, and because that's where the best solutions will come from. If everyone just kind of like goes along with things without putting their sense in. But with these, from like, say, the legal aspect, when you go to start a new company, is there like a legal contract drawn up between all three of you that makes sure that everybody is always putting in their share to earn their equity back?
Well, yeah, we've obviously, when we started companies, we've done things like having vesting agreements and things like that. But we've always thought of ourselves as somewhat equal partners. The current situation's a little unique in that Sproutbox, we decided to invest in some of the companies within Sproutbox. So Cheddar actually spun out from Sproutbox because one of the things we discovered is that we were spending as much time. We were trying to build something from literally an idea stage to early revenue stage every 3 months and get it out on the market. And what we found is we were spending as much time billing and monetization in the product as we were the platform we were trying to build itself. And so Cheddar sort of spun out of Sproutbox. And so now Mark and I are working on Cheddar, and we have another portfolio company, Periodic, that Brad is running. So we have an interesting dynamic now because it's sort of the first time that it hasn't really been all three of us together. We still share an office and we see each other constantly and we talk to each other. We're on each other's boards and talk to each other about our companies all the time. But, so the arrangement is slightly different than it's been in the past, but we've mostly just thought of ourselves as equal partners. One, I'm kind of, again, in the middle. I was CTO at our last company. Brad was our CEO and Mark was our director of engineering. But we've always thought of ourselves as sort of equal partners. And because we've had that approach, both in terms of equity as well as in terms of, employment agreements, even to the point where this isn't as true anymore, but for a long time, we all paid ourselves the same salary. And so, we've always just operated that way, whether it was through legal agreement or not. We knew that we were all valuable to each other and that we were better together. So we were fine splitting up the world that way.
Yeah, which is totally fair. It's just some people are so strict that they have to have this legal document. And I've done numerous partnerships where I don't have them. And I've done several where I do have them. And they can be beneficial, I think, for both.
They can.
In both ways.
Oh, yeah. I absolutely, all the deals when we made investments in all those companies, part of what we were doing at Sproutbox was helping with formation of companies. And so, we definitely did 4-year vesting schedules with 1-year cliffs for all of the, all the founders.
What does that mean? Like, before we skip over vesting schedule and 1-year and cliffs, like, just, can you explain to the listener?
Yeah. So you basically agree to let the company hold the equity, all the equity for the company, and then you earn that over time. So over some time period, so maybe it's a 4-year time period, each year or each month, you can decide how you want that vesting schedule to happen. And it can even be milestone based, but you basically say you're receiving equity back from the company the longer you work at the organization. And that happens a lot with employees. Sort of the standard option pool or employee incentive plan will have a schedule to it. So if you just start on day one, let's say you're going to get 2% equity in the company, you don't get it immediately. But we encourage doing that with founders as well. So, that way, if one founder decides to leave a year in or 2 years in, or even, 6 months in, it just isn't working out, the company still holds that equity and can find someone to replace that person. Because one thing you really, really don't want is if there is a conflict, if there is a divorce for whatever reason in the organization, you don't want somebody with a good chunk of equity sort of on the outside throwing bombs in and frustrated. So that kind of protects everyone from that situation. The cliff just means that we don't actually start giving any equity at all until you've worked on it for at least a year. And you can configure that any way that you want. You can say, we want to give some equity immediately and then that's just a typical approach is to say, okay, we're going to have a 1-year cliff on this. The total vesting schedule is going to be over 4 years. And that was sort of our default starting template for a new company. And I think that works out really, really well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'll find an article or two on vesting schedules and vesting agreements and link to it in the show notes for people to read up further if they want. But this is a really crucial aspect of setting up sort of a partnership when you want to start a business. If you were going to go the legal route and have the contract, This is the best way to protect you and any co-founders from somebody getting distracted or moving on with something else and then the company being held hostage.
And it's really, if that happens, that's okay, right? So like it actually says, it in some ways, it actually empowers that sort of scenario where you're like, hey, I thought this was going to be what I wanted to do. Maybe I don't this isn't exactly what I want to do. And so maybe I can get a little bit of, have a little bit of equity from what I put in so far, but it's also cool to have that and then go get to do what you want to do every day. To me, one of the most important things is that you're enjoying what you're doing. You're not doing what you're doing for some other reason other than I really, really enjoy doing this. And if it turns out you think you want to be a founder and you decide that you don't, that's totally cool. And this allows that to happen for everybody involved in a very positive way.
Very well said. Very well said. All right, Mike, this has been an absolute blast. I do want to wrap up on one final question for you, if I can.
Sure.
So there's this idea I've worked with over the last 400 conversations I've had with entrepreneurs about the entrepreneurial gap, which kind of can be this gap we live in, I think, as entrepreneurs, as dreamers, always pushing forward, which I agree we have to do. But for a moment or two here, Mike, I would like to, rather than have you look forward, I want you to stop and turn around and look behind you. You've been building businesses and solving problems, I think, for 15, 16, 17 years, since college at this point. You've probably had a ton of wins, a ton of losses, some highs, some lows. But I would love to just sort of get the overall, what's your overall feeling of this whole sort of crazy journey up until today?
It's been a lot of fun. I mean, it's, for me, I did not expect really to be an entrepreneur. If you look back at even the schools that I went to, when I was in high school, I was a physics nerd and I was a good student, and all the schools I applied to were all engineering schools, except for Indiana University. And I wish I could say that there's some brilliant reason that I went to IU other than, I toured all the campuses and there were, beautiful girls here laying out everywhere. And I was like, okay, I have to go here. I was 18. But in the end, that really changed me. Like I became much more social than I would have been. I might have been a very happy electrical engineer. So sort of as I look back on all of it, it was a somewhat unexpected journey. And I don't necessarily know that, you would have thought, if you had met me in high school, you would have thought I would have been an entrepreneur or done this my whole life. But I've just followed what I really, really enjoyed doing. And as you talk about like all the different crazy stuff that I try to do at once, I talked to a bunch of students at IU and they always ask the same question. They're like, so how many hours do you work? And I'm like, I always answer the same way, which is like, well, am I working right now? I'm standing in front of a bunch of students talking about entrepreneurship. I mean, it's probably good for recruiting, but I'm not here for that. I'm here because this is really fun for me. And so as I look back on that, I've had a blast doing it, and I can't see not doing it over and over and over again. So for me, I'm happy with the choices that I've made. Obviously, there are a ton of things that it's like, man, if I had known how taxes worked, I probably wouldn't have made $18,000 in a year and had a tax bill for $12,000 because I didn't understand how it worked. Stuff like that, I would obviously like to do again. But, on the whole, man, it's just a blast. It's a blast to get to do what you're passionate about. And yeah, you have what's the adage? As an entrepreneur, you get to decide when to work all the time. but like, I get to do what I really enjoy doing, and I get to pursue the things that I care most about, and I'm blessed to do that.
I love it. Great answer. So, Mike, we've talked about your businesses in passing. I know you have many things going on, but we did sort of mention Cheddar and Sproutbox. Could you specifically give the elevator pitch for Cheddar and for Sproutbox?
Sure,
and tell the listener where to find both of them?
Yeah, well, so Sproutbox actually isn't making new investments, right? We're in what we call harvest mode on our fund. So that's at sproutbox.com. But right now I'm just laser focused on growing Cheddar. So I joined up there about 6 months ago as CEO. I was chairman before that and involved, but I'm excited to really dig into it. Cheddar is a usage-based billing API. So what we do is we help other software companies, other software as a service companies monetize their products. So if you're a developer in particular and you're building a SaaS platform, you can leverage Cheddar to cut the time it takes to build billing into your platform by like 90%. So it's an API. It works differently than most payment processing that you think about. We don't communicate in dollars and cents. So what happens is you simply identify the 10 or 15 things you want to track in your software platform, like someone adds a user, someone uploads a document, someone sends a chat message. Whatever those things you want to track, we track in real time throughout the billing period, and we sort of take over all of billing from there. We run the automated transactions, we hit cards, we do customer communication, we do reporting to tell you what your MRR and your churn rate and your lifetime value is. So all those things that when we were at Sproutbox building a company every 3 months, we kept building over and over, and we wanted our companies to have and often got left out, are just available right out of the box in an API that is really, really simple to use and great for developers. And so for me, I love helping companies monetize. I love helping startups become more sustainable. And that's been a passion of mine for a really long time. And this this product that we have at Cheddar allows me to do that every day, which is cool.
Very cool. And we find Cheddar
at getcheddar.com.
Getcheddar.com, sproutbox.com.
Yep.
Vesting agreement, links to some posts about those. I will put all of those into the show notes. Plus, it seems like you spend some time on Twitter.
I do. At Trotzke is my handle there. You're welcome to
very cool.
Check me out there.
So I'll link to that as well for you, but it is at Trotzke, Trotzke, or ZKE, depending on where you're located. And you can follow up with Mike on Twitter if you have any more questions or just to tell him that you enjoyed the show.
Awesome.
All right, Mike, it's been fun, man. I thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you for sharing so openly, and just please keep doing what you're doing, man, because it's awesome and inspiring to watch.
All right. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. So that was the conversation, and that was fun. But we're not done yet. Now we need to go back. We need to go back through that conversation and find the one thing that Mike said. Are you ready? All right, let's do it. Let's find the hack.
I feel like that sort of sense of failure that people have when their initial idea didn't solve the problem is when people stop working on solving problems. And that shouldn't be, you shouldn't become an entrepreneur because you have a solution. You should become an entrepreneur because something bugs you and you're frustrated by it and you want to fix it and you're going to keep working until you fix it.
And that's the hack. Mike. I love this. This is good. You shouldn't become an entrepreneur because you have a solution. You should become an entrepreneur because something bothers you or because you want to see something different in the world. Because rather than waiting for somebody else to possibly create the thing that you wish was there or that problem was solved, then you should do it. You should step up and do it yourself. That's what brings out the entrepreneur in us, is just creating something out of nothing that we feel needs to exist in the world because it will help people or it will make people's lives easier or faster or simpler or more fun or funnier or better in some way. Right? It's not this sense of failure that Mike talks about that lots of us feel when we create something and it doesn't quite solve the problem that we're hoping it will solve. We tend to throw out the whole problem rather than the solution that we came up with is not the right solution for the problem, but the problem still exists. And so if you felt that that problem was a real problem, Mike thinks that you should come up with a better solution. Just keep working at that problem. Don't quit because it didn't work the first time. Because as he goes on to say, that idea that you came up with in the shower one day isn't the right solution. That doesn't mean that you're no good or that it's not a real problem or that it doesn't need to be just tweaked a little bit and that you should give up all hope on it. It's just that it wasn't the right one at that time, in that moment, in that place, and in that iteration. You shouldn't become an entrepreneur because you have a solution. You should become an entrepreneur because you want to solve a problem. Mike, thank you very, very much. All right, so that was fun. I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. HackTheEntrepreneur.com is the site. Head over there and you can find Mike's show notes, everything we talked about today, as well as a vesting agreement link that I'm going to track down, Get Cheddar, Sproutbox, and Mike's social media, as well as the show sponsors from today. You can find their links and their special offers for you as a Hack the Entrepreneur listener. All right, it's been fun. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really do truly appreciate it. And please, until next time, keep hacking the entrepreneur.